Hit me. Like a card counter on a 3-day bender, the Formula One circus will invade the Las Vegas Strip this weekend, spend lots of cash, and then skip town. We are going to hit on a review of F1 in Las Vegas, and we'll stand pat on the rumblings and rumors leading up to the event. So buckle up, roll up your sleeves, grab a drink, count your chips, and get ready for another edition of F1 Brake Check.
Welcome. You are listening to F1 Brake Check, the epic podcast for all things Formula One, where we discuss technology, history, news, and perspective. With your hosts, Scott Vick and Corey Brune.
All right, so welcome back to F1 Brake Check. With me, as always, is my intrepid co-host, Corey Brune. Corey, how you doing today, sir?
Fantastic. It was a beautiful weekend. It was, 70s?
Yeah,
I got it.
Absolutely beautiful weather.
Brand new motorcycle, so I was out on that as much as humanly possible. So much power. So much power in that thing. I don't even know what to do with it. It has so much power. So my last bike was 850. I increased my bike size by 1,000 cc's. So it gets up. It has
Yes.
It definitely can go.
Yes, and having seen it this weekend, it is also beautiful. So congrats on that.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Thank you. How about you? How was your weekend?
No,
Hell, Friday, I completely forgot. We hung out Friday. We had some
Yep.
beer. We had a couple cigars.
Yep. Got to spend some time over at Industrial Cigar Company. So got to see some acquaintances of ours who are, we really enjoy getting to catch up with. Had some great beer from the East Texas Brewing Company in Tyler, Texas. Shout out to them. And yeah, we got to enjoy some really great cigars, got to have a really nice weekend, really great weather and everything, like you said. So all in all, you got to watch some football, American football. We had the Grand Habano anniversary, 25th anniversary. Excellent cigar.
Smoked so well. It's really
smoked so wonderfully.
Oh, and you didn't say the best news. OU won this weekend.
Yes, they did. So for those of you who've been listening to us for a little bit, you know that I am a proud alumni of the University of Oklahoma. A really nice bounce back after the last 2 weeks of having some really tough losses and everything. And they definitely righted the ship this week and bowled over West Virginia. So got to actually go to the game and everything this time. Got to take my son for a change. Usually it's my daughter who goes with me to the games, but I got to take my son this time. Nice. Because my daughter wasn't available, and we had a really great time. So yeah, it was all in all just a really great weekend.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yep.
Always good to have a win too.
Yeah, absolutely. So all right, let's talk about a quick review of the history of the Formula One in Las Vegas. So if you were listening back to our first and second podcast about the various U.S. Grand Prix, both in Miami and in Austin, we did touch upon Las Vegas and its history, but just a little bit more context and everything. The Grand Prix was actually only run for 2 years, 1981 and 1982. And so this was even back before I started watching Formula One. So I didn't get to actually watch them in person, but I've actually gotten to go back and watch, I believe it was the 82 race. Somebody got me a copy of the race from the BBC telecast of it and everything. Got to watch the great Murray Walker do his thing.
Oh,
so
cool. That's awesome.
It was so very cool. So the Las Vegas track was pretty much universally hated by the drivers and the fans because it was, as we've touched upon before, it was built inside the car park at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. Basically, it was a street circuit, but it was built on a flat car park. So it was flat as a board. They did intentionally make it very wide to allow for overtaking and things like that. But one of the problems that they had is that being in the desert, they had a lot of problems with sand blowing across the track. So it made it super slippery, made it for some really difficult driving for the drivers themselves. So 1981 winner was Alan Jones and Williams Ford. Nelson Piquet clinched his first title by finishing 5th, but was so overcome by the heat that, because again, being in the desert, that it took nearly 15 minutes for him to exit the car in Parc Fermé. 1982 saw Michele Alboreto win for Tyrrell, and it was the team's first win since Monaco in 78. And it was also notable as the last Formula One race for the great Mario Andretti, driving for Ferrari. And then in the next year, he would make his full-time return to IndyCar. All right, so now moving on to 2023, let's take and do a quick preview of this week's festivities. By the aerial shots and mapping, the track looks to be a pretty interesting mix. Although there has been some memes that I think are just absolutely hilarious.
Pew the pig.
Yeah, exactly. So if you've ever seen the episode of The Simpsons where Homer adopts a pig, and at one point he's using the pig, is walking across the ceiling, and while Homer sings the Spider Pig song sung to the tune of the Spider-Man theme song from the 70s cartoon. And so there's been a number of memes about that where the track layout looks like Spider Pig walking across the ceiling. Because the pit straight and the pit garages are actually built on a tract of land that Formula One actually purchased for that purpose. The front straight and the first couple of turns are actually on a purpose-built section of track before it actually takes and exits out. I believe it's either turn 4 or turn 5, exits out onto the city streets. One of the sections will actually be a very fast left-hander around the Sphere, which for those who have been keeping track, the Sphere is a new concert venue in Las Vegas that is absolutely massive in size, but it's most notable for the fact that it is completely round. The entire outside of it is covered in high definition LEDs. Between the blast down the front on the Vegas Strip and the Sphere, because race is being held at night, I don't know how well it's going to show up on television, but I think some of the photographs and everything that are going to come out of this are just going to be amazing. We'll see if the racing's any good, which I think will be the biggest determining factor and everything of whether, the racing is any good. By all accounts, in laying out the track and everything, the FIA, Formula One, and Las Vegas have tried very hard to make a track that will be interesting for the drivers, but at the same time will provide a lot of interest for the fans as well. At first glance, the track does look pretty boring. It does look very boring, but then when you start drilling into it a little more, especially the sections, like I said, the sections and everything that around the Sphere look like they will be the interesting mix between slow speed and high speed corners. The hairpin at turn 1 is going to be very interesting, especially on starts. And if the hairpin at turn 1 could get very, very interesting, especially on starts. And if we have any restarts, I think it could get very interesting. So all in all, it has the potential to be pretty interesting, but we'll see once the cars actually get out on track and we actually see them turn a wheel in anger.
Now, what about elevation changes?
Almost none. Vegas is flat as a pancake. You're in the middle of the desert. Comparing it to other street circuits, like Monaco and Singapore, and even in some degrees, Miami, which does have, not a lot, but it does have some elevation changes and everything. This one will be almost perfectly flat. It's only like maybe 20 or 30 meters of a total elevation change for the entire track. Yeah, it's going to be relatively flat. It's going to be very reminiscent of Jeddah because parts of the track run through the old city, especially right there by the Citadel, where you have very short, super tight blast up through, I believe it's 12 or 13. It's going to be a very, very flat track, and it's not going to have a whole lot of elevation changes and everything. So they've worked very hard to take and try to make the track be something that the drivers are going to find interesting, but at the same time, it's going to be relatively exciting for the fans and everything. So we'll see. By most accounts and a lot of the rumors that are coming out of Vegas, this could end up being a disaster. First of all, a lot of the hotels and other establishments along the strip that have views of the track were selling packages that you could get. So like I want to say it was the MGM Grand had a package where you could rent one of the penthouse suites that are at the top of it that's supposed to have, a really great view of a large part of the track, but it was going for some exorbitant amount of money. I want to say it was like $1 million or more. Wow. And all of the tickets, even just grandstand tickets, were way more expensive than any other race in the US or in most of the rest of the world. That a large chunk of tickets have gone unsold. A lot of the casinos have been slashing the prices on their packages, trying to get people to buy because they were not buying at the super high rates that they were charging before. So there's that. Then a lot of the people in Las Vegas have been very upset. There was actually several pedestrian bridges where spectators could go and potentially watch the race without paying for a ticket. And so the city of Las Vegas put up these screens and everything to try to block people's views. But people have actually gone in and have like torn these screens back down. The anger that they're having towards F1 and the organizers and everything in trying to make as much cash as they possibly can from this whole thing, which, I mean, it's Formula One. It's a cash making machine. I mean, it's not cheap to run, but at the same time, they also make loads of money simply by staging these races. It's not like the days where when Caesars ran the first year at Caesar's Palace, from everything that I've read, said that it was just a disaster, that Caesars took a huge bath the first year on staging that race. Nowadays, no, very hard for the organizers to lose money by having an F1 race. So, I mean, all things considered, it has the potential, at least this first year. Now, if the racing is fantastic, if they have a great weekend, it could very much be like Miami, where the first year wasn't that great. The second year was way, way better. We could have a situation like that. Or it could be another one of those situations where maybe 3 years and they're done in Vegas.
Right.
So what about you? Anything that you've heard?
The only things that I've heard are lack of elevation, that the track isn't very interesting, especially for it to be where it is in the race schedule, second to last race. This should be like one of the more exciting tracks.
Yes.
So it seems like to me, maybe they should have flip-flopped Miami with Las Vegas.
With Vegas, yeah.
I haven't really heard too much other than the track's not very interesting. It's going to be kind of a boring race, and Max has already won.
Yes, yeah.
You were saying that Max isn't actually a fan of Las Vegas. I hadn't heard that.
He has come out in the last few days. None of the drivers have turned a wheel on the actual track. I know that I believe it was Perez and Ricardo and a couple other drivers took and did a demonstration down the Las Vegas Strip a few months back. But nobody has turned a wheel in anger on this track. So Max has come out very publicly saying he does not think that Las Vegas was a very good idea. Like a lot of people, he doesn't think that the racing is going to be very interesting. He thinks that it is going to be a very boring track to drive. So we'll see. I mean, he's been definitely the most vocal of the drivers, talking about how he's not really looking forward to it, and he didn't think that Vegas was a very good idea. But I think a lot of the drivers, they may not be as vocal. Like the great line from Ted Lasso, it's like, excuse him, he's Dutch.
So
Excuse
true,
his
but
bluntness, he's Dutch.
They don't mince words, man.
No, they do not.
Very open and honest.
Yes. Exactly. So I think that Max not being a fan of the track, it's like anything. He is such a competitor that even if he doesn't like the track, even if he doesn't want to be there, as soon as he sits down in that car and as soon as that visor comes down, he's the assassin. He's the babyface assassin, and he will destroy everyone in his wake given the chance.
Oh, yeah. We've said it on previous podcasts. He's looking for as many points, as many wins as possible.
As many records as possible.
Yeah, that's it.
He is taking every opportunity he can, and he is cementing his place in history with every single opportunity that he's been given this year.
No doubt about it. Mercedes ban on gambling, so they're not allowed to gamble. Huh?
Yeah, so the entire Mercedes team, now whether this extends to the drivers or not, I don't know, but Toto Wolff has put down a rule, ban, whatever you want to call it, that nobody from the team is allowed to gamble this weekend while they're in Las Vegas. Which, to be perfectly honest with you, I'm surprised more team principals have not come right out and said it. I'm sure that a lot of the other teams have the same rules in place or restrictions. I guarantee you that all of the teams are going to have some kind of curfew in place.
Yep.
that because being Las Vegas and everything, they don't want mechanics going out and getting blasted, winding up in jail and everything and things like that. They don't want those kind of disruptions, even though they are in Las Vegas, Sin City and everything, at least ways during the race weekend. I guarantee you there's going to be a lot of restrictions that are going to be placed on the crew members and everybody, and mechanics, PR people, everybody is going to have these restrictions in place.
Yeah. Well, for those that haven't been to Las Vegas, when you go into the casinos and you start gambling, you get free drinks. They want to liquor you up as much as possible, so you spend as much as possible without thinking how much money you're spending. So I definitely understand why Toto would say that, because not only from a gambling perspective, but also because more than likely, if you're gambling, more than likely you're going to be drinking. If you're going to be drinking, then the next day it's not going to feel so good.
No, exactly. You don't want hungover mechanics playing around with, a multi-million-dollar car.
Yeah. Well, that if you're trying to get the tire changed in 2.4 seconds, that ain't happening if you have a hangover.
No, probably not. No. You definitely do not want to look like an Alfa Romeo mechanic and trying to put the wheel on backwards.
Remember Haas? What was it? 4 or 5 years ago, there's a Haas mechanic that put on the wheel wrong on both cars. And as soon as the car went out, the tire came off.
Yes.
You don't want to be that guy.
Actually, there's been a number of documented cases.
Oh, yeah.
It was Sebastian Buemi. He was in the Toro Rosso, and it was at the 2010 Chinese Grand Prix where the wheels not one of the wheels got attached properly, or there was a catastrophic failure, or I don't know what happened, but yes, he hit the brakes and all 4 wheels flew off all at once. If you go look it up on YouTube, Scott Mansell, no relation to Nigel Mansell, who runs the Driver 61 YouTube channel, has an absolutely wonderful breakdown of that accident so if you get a chance, go check it out.
That's like one of those Southwest Airlines commercials. You want to get away?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So next up, Haas's Gamble.
Yeah. So going from the ban on gambling for the team members, Haas, the team, is taking a gamble because apparently Nico Hulkenberg has not been a fan of the B-Spec chassis that Haas introduced a few races ago. And so for this race, Hulkenberg is actually going back to the A-Spec chassis. Hulkenberg's going to drive the A-Spec. Magnussen is going to drive the B-Spec. They're doing this just in an effort to tighten, because right now with Haas being last place in the Constructors' Championship, they are trying to gather as many points as they possibly can. So Gunther Steiner has decided to roll the dice and let Hulkenberg run the A-Spec chassis in hopes that they figure they have nothing to lose at this point with only 2 races left in the season, that they're going to do everything that they can to try to maximize points as best as they can. So it will be very interesting.
So going to Netflix Cup.
Sure. Yeah, let's talk about that real quick. So have you seen anything about this?
No.
Okay, so Netflix, in an effort to boost subscribership, is doing their first ever live sporting event. Netflix has the Drive to Survive, which, as we all know and love, is the 8 to 10 part documentary season that they do every year on Formula One. Well, in addition, for the non-Formula One fans, Netflix has also done another very similar series around golf called Full Swing.
Yeah.
And so what they have done is Netflix, like I said, is doing their very first live sporting event on Netflix on their streaming service. And they are taking 4 drivers from Drive to Survive, and they're taking 4 professional golfers from Full Swing, and they're pairing them up in teams, and they are doing a 8-hole match play tournament with the 2 best teams playing for the cup on the 9th hole. PGA players Ricky Fowler, Justin Thomas, Max Homa, and Collins Morikawa. I know I probably butchered that, so I apologize if you're out there listening, Colin. They will be paired with Lando Norris, Carlos Sainz, Alex Albon, and Pierre Gasly. Ricky Fowler and Lando Norris will be one of the pairs, and I believe it was Justin Thomas and Alex Albon is one of the other pairs. We're recording this on Monday, November the 13th, and this is all going down tomorrow, Tuesday, November the 14th. I know I'll be watching, even though I'm not a fan of golf. I know that Lando is a pretty avid golfer outside of Formula One, and I believe Carlos is a big golfer as well. Getting to watch them play and compare themselves up against professionals, tour professionals, make for some really great bragging rights come Friday and Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah, you may have been able to outdrive me on the golf course, but I outdrove you on the track,
Exactly. Where it mattered.
Yes, exactly. Where it truly mattered. So, but the one thing that is going to be interesting, though, is that if you remember from earlier this year, is Netflix had another reality TV show called Love Island, and they tried to do a live telecast of a reunion of the cast earlier this year. And it was a complete debacle. The entire service just completely cratered when that happened. It'll be really interesting tomorrow to see if they're actually able to pull this off or if it ends up being another spectacular failure.
On to Peter Windsor's comments.
Yes, I don't know if you saw this or not. For those of you who aren't familiar, Peter Windsor, many, many, many years ago, was a member of the Williams F1 team. And he later left Williams to become a journalist. And so he was a commentator back when Formula One was being broadcast by NBC under the Speed Channel flag. He was the pit commentator for the F1 broadcasts. And he was also a writer for F1 magazine. And he's also written for a number of other publications writing on the subject of Formula One. So he has a very deep technical knowledge of Formula One. He was at Williams during their heyday of the active suspension and the turbo era. He has a very good insight into Formula One. And somebody had asked him if he thought that because McLaren provides power units to themselves, but they also provide power units to Aston Martin and Alfa Romeo, because now that Aston Martin and McLaren have been outperforming Mercedes, the quote unquote works team, the question was posed to him, would Toto try to screw over the other teams? And Peter said no, because it's basically would be impossible to do now with the way that the rules in around the power units are written, in the fact that all of the parts are homologated, which means that they have to come out of a common parts bin, because the way that the rule is written in Formula One is that the manufacturers must provide comparable units to all teams. But I know at one point, the manufacturers actually had to give the engines to the FIA. And then after the FIA had done the scrutineering on the motors, on the power units, to make sure that they were in compliance, they actually went into a pool and they were assigned at random to the team, so that way it made it pretty much impossible for the manufacturers to favor one team over the other. And especially like in the case of McLaren, where they are the works team, and same thing with Ferrari, who provide power units to Haas. And I said Alfa Romeo was a Mercedes one, but they're not. They are actually, Alfa Romeo is actually a Ferrari team for the power units. I forget who the fourth team is now. Oh, Williams. I'm sorry. Yes, it's Williams Mercedes. So yes. And you've got the same thing with Red Bull, who provide motors to themselves and to AlphaTauri. And it's the same thing where they cannot give preference to the senior team in Red Bull. Even though they're the ones providing the power units, they have to provide the exact same power units to the junior team in AlphaTauri. But I thought Windsor's comments were very interesting and very adamant that no, the FIA has rules in place that prevents the manufacturers from being able to, because he said, if given the opportunity, yes. And in days past, yes, there was definitely situations where certain teams that were running the same motors, as this was back pre-power unit days when they were all still running naturally aspirated, V10s and V8s and things like that. It was possible that when Ford was still providing customer engines to teams, they would also have works teams where the works teams would get all of the upgraded parts first, and the customer teams would not get those parts till much later, if ever. So at one point, like when Benetton was the customer, was a works team for Ford, and you had other teams further back in the pack that were running Ford engines, but they were strictly customers. That's why Benetton was always had much better motors in that case. Same thing with Renault when they had their own works team, and they were also providing engines to other teams. The works teams would always get the upgrades, and they would always be better engines. So, like I said, Formula One instituted the new power unit rules years ago and said that, yes, all of the manufacturers had to provide power units to, I believe that the rule was written that they had to provide them to at least 3 of the teams besides themselves. So that's how come you now have Haas and Alfa Romeo running Ferrari engines. And I remember back in the early days of that, when before Minardi was actually purchased by Red Bull and became the junior team, when Minardi was still the scrappy little, team that could, they would run Ferrari power units, but they were basically year-old Ferrari units. Formula One has gone a long way to take and try to make sure that, at least in respect to the power units, that everybody is on the same footing throughout the year.
It makes a lot more sense that you have regulations around it, that FIA is making sure that it's unlisted. You don't know which engines you actually get. It's competitive. And just like what we saw with AlphaTauri, one race could be the $20 million paycheck.
Literally. Oh yeah, easily.
That much money on the line. They aren't going to do anything illegal, but they'll try and find ways around. So what about your predictions? I have a few, but I want you to go first.
Okay. Bold prediction number 1. We are going to see at least one red flag during this weekend's race. It's normal to see red flags during qualifying and free practice and things like that. During the race, because of the way that the front straightaway is going into that tight hairpin, I guarantee you we're going to see some carnage definitely on the first lap. During the start, because you're going to have all 20 cars charging towards that first super tight corner. I guarantee you that we will see at least one red flag. Second bold prediction is, I'm saying it now, Max will not win this weekend.
Nice. Okay.
I am predicting Lando will get his first win. One of the Ferrari pair will be the victor this weekend.
Okay. Anything else?
Those are my 2 predictions. What are your predictions?
You took the Norris one. I was going to say Norris, but since you said Norris, I'm going to say with Verstappen wins the race. I'm going to say that Leclerc will be haunted by yet again another unlucky gremlin, and he will not finish this race. Sainz will. He will come in 6-ish. I predict Checo will be within the top 5. Won't make podium. I believe Alonso will, as well as Norris.
All right. I like it. Yes. All right. So now that you've said your predictions, I actually have 3 more predictions that have now come to my head. Prediction number 1, we will see a final word on Logan Sargent will be announced as the second driver at Williams for next year. As we talked about last week during the Brazil recap, I think that they're waiting until Friday morning is when we will see that the contract with Logan has been signed, sealed, and delivered. Prediction number 2, I'm like you. I think that Alonso will be back on the podium this weekend, but I am going to predict that after the form last weekend, I am going to predict Stroll will out-qualify Alonso.
Okay.
But Alonso, because of his superior racecraft, will pass him either through brilliant pit stop strategy or by pace and very crafty driving, much like he did with Perez last week at Brazil. Those are my 3 additional predictions.
Love it. All right. So time to wrap it up.
Yeah, I think so. All right then, folks. Well, thank you for listening. We're going to come back to you in a few days' time after the circus has invaded Las Vegas, and we'll get to see our predictions right. Will the racing be boring? Will Max storm to another victory, or will Lando or another driver come in to the good? So we'll have all that and more in a few days' time when we come back to you with another F1 Brake Check.
Thank you for listening to F1 Brake Check. If you have enjoyed what you heard, Don't miss a single episode by hitting that subscribe button in your favorite podcatcher. Also, help us grow by sharing us with your friends and fellow F1 fans. We value your feedback and passion, so please take a moment to review our podcast. Your reviews help us grow and improve, and it means the world to us. Share your thoughts, rate us, and let us know how we can make the show experience even better. F1 Brake Check is a production of Brake Check Media. For your hosts Scott Vick and Corey Broom, until next time, stay inside track limits, and try not to pitch it in the kitty litter.